My mother-in-law helped me pick out my wedding dress. She stood in that dressing room in Roswell, Georgia, looked me in the eye, and told me I looked beautiful. She watched me walk down the aisle toward her son. She clapped. And she did all of this knowing that her son and I are first cousins. She had known since 2003. 5 years before Kevin and I even met. And when my 76-year-old grandmother confronted her and tried to stop the wedding, Patricia threatened her into 17 years of silence. But here is the thing. My grandmother found a way to tell me anyway. She just had to die first. She turned her $2.3 million will into the one confession nobody could ignore. And that confession did not just confirm a family secret. It blew my entire life apart. But let me start from the beginning. Before I get into everything, if you are the kind of person who cannot walk away from a story like this, hit that subscribe button. We share real stories people have posted online, new ones every single day, and trust me, they only get crazier. Alright. Here is what happened. My name is Jess. I am 38. I live in Marietta, Georgia, and until 6 weeks ago I thought I had a completely normal life. I married my husband Kevin when I was 24. We met at a Chili's in Kennesaw in July of 2008. I think it was mid-July, maybe the 18th or 19th, because it was right after my roommate Becca got that job at SunTrust and we were out celebrating. He was there with co-workers, I was there with Becca, and he bought me a President margarita and made me laugh so hard I almost spit it out. Something about the way the waiter kept calling him sir even though he was like 26. We dated for 2 years, got engaged December 2009, married October 16, 2010 at the Carl House in Auburn, Georgia. I remember the weather that day. 72 degrees, not a cloud. I remember my shoes pinching by the third dance, those stupid ivory pumps from David's bridal that I spent way too much on. I remember every single detail of that day. Except the one that actually mattered. My grandmother, Dorothy Ann Calloway, passed away January 4th of this year. She was 91. Sharp as a tack until the very end, still doing the AJC crossword every morning in pen, not pencil. She was stubborn about that, still calling me every Sunday at exactly 4:15 to ask if I was eating enough. My parents divorced when I was 11, my mom moved to Tucson, so Grandma Dorothy basically raised me from 6th grade on. She was everything to me. And what she did with her will is something I am still trying to wrap my head around. Her estate was worth $2.3 million. House in Buckhead owned outright, a rental property in Decatur that she had been collecting $1,200 a month on since like 2014, and investment accounts at Fidelity totaling $847,000. I was the sole beneficiary. But her will had one condition I had never seen before. Before a single dollar could be distributed, I was required to complete a DNA test. Not 23andMe. Not Ancestry. A clinical lab called Genomic Diagnostics of Atlanta on Northside Drive. Her attorney, Richard Kessler, a man who had known my grandmother for 30 years, handed me the paperwork and said, quote, "Your grandmother was very specific about this and I am not at liberty to discuss why until you have the results." I remember thinking that sounded rehearsed. Like he had practiced it in the mirror or something. Like he had been dreading this conversation for a while. I figured it was a paternity thing. Maybe my dad was not my real dad. Maybe there was some family secret about my mom. Honestly, I almost did not care. I just wanted to honor Grandma Dorothy's wishes and get through the estate process. So on January 19th, a Sunday, I went to the lab, gave a saliva sample, sat in a waiting room that smelled like hand sanitizer and carpet cleaner, and went home. I had no idea that sample was about to blow my entire life apart. The results came back February 3rd. I will never forget that date because it is my son Tyler's 12th birthday. I was in the kitchen frosting a Tres Leches cake, the one from that tasty video he likes, and my hands were covered in whipped cream when my phone buzzed. Richard Kessler. He said, "Jess, I need you to come to my office." "Not tomorrow. Today." I said, "Richard, it is my son's birthday." He paused for what felt like 10 seconds and said, "I understand, but this cannot wait." His voice sounded different. Flat. Heavy. Like somebody had died, which, I mean, somebody had, but this was something else. I told Kevin I had to run an errand for the estate stuff. Left Tyler opening presents. He was tearing into some Lego Star Wars set, the big one, the Star Destroyer I think, and I just walked out the door. Drove 35 minutes to Kessler's office on Peachtree in the dark. Sat down across from a man who looked like he had aged 10 years in a month. He slid a manila envelope across the desk without saying a word. Inside was a 4-page report from Genomic Diagnostics. I do not have a science background, I barely passed Bio 101 in college, but the summary was written in plain English. Based on analysis of 700,000 genetic markers, I shared approximately 12.8% of my DNA with a sample designated reference sample DC 2019. 12.8%. The exact range for a first cousin relationship. Richard told me that reference sample DC 2019 was a sample my grandmother had submitted in 2019 under a separate agreement with the same lab. It belonged to Kevin Michael Hargrove, my husband. I said what? Not as a question. Just the word. What? I could hear my own pulse in my ears, like that whooshing sound you get when you stand up too fast. And then Richard said there is more. Those 3 words almost broke me because I could not imagine what more could possibly look like. He opened a desk drawer and pulled out a cream-colored envelope sealed with actual wax. Who even does that anymore? My grandmother, apparently. Her handwriting on the front said for Jessica, when the truth comes out. The letter was 3 pages, handwritten on her personal stationery, the kind with the little magnolias at the top that she ordered from some catalogue every year. I need you to understand that as I read this letter, my entire life was just falling apart. Piece by piece. Sentence by sentence. Grandma Dorothy wrote that my father, James Robert Calloway, had a half-brother. My grandfather Harold Calloway had an affair in 1971 with a woman named Suzanne Delaney in Macon, Georgia. That affair produced a son who was given the last name Hargrove, his mother's maiden name. That son was Gerald Wayne Hargrove, Kevin's father. So let me just spell it out because I had to read it 3 times before it clicked. My grandfather and Kevin's grandmother had an affair. My dad and Kevin's dad are half-brothers. Kevin and I are first cousins. But the letter did not stop there. What my grandmother wrote next made me physically sick. I actually had to put the paper down and put my head between my knees for a second, which, looking back, poor Richard just had to sit there and watch. She discovered all of this in 2009. She had been going through my grandfather's papers, you know how it is after someone dies, boxes everywhere, and she found an old savings account passbook with monthly deposits to an account in Macon. She hired a private investigator who traced the deposits to Suzanne Delaney and eventually to Gerald Hargrove and his family. When she saw the last name Hargrove, she said she felt like the floor dropped out from under her. She confronted Kevin's mother, Patricia Hargrove, in November 2009. 1 month before Kevin proposed to me. And this brings us to what I told you about at the very start. Patricia already knew. She had known since 2003. She found letters in Gerald's mother Suzanne's house after Suzanne passed. Love letters from my grandfather. A birth certificate listing Harold Calloway as the father. Patricia knew her husband Gerald was the illegitimate son of Harold Calloway. She knew that when Kevin started dating me in 2008, he was dating his own cousin. And she sat at our dinner table. She hugged me at holidays. She said nothing. Not one word. When my grandmother confronted her, Patricia said, if you say one word I will tell your son about Harold's affair and destroy what is left of your family's reputation in this town. My grandmother was 76 years old. She had already lost my grandfather to a stroke in 2004. She had watched her son's marriage fall apart. She was terrified of losing him too. So she stayed quiet. But she never stopped trying. And this is the part that really gets me. The letter described 3 separate attempts to get me away from Kevin. In 2009 she set me up on a date with her friend's grandson, some guy named Mitchell or Michael, I cannot even remember now. I thought it was so random and weird at the time. Then she told me she had heard Kevin was not faithful. I brushed it off because I trusted him completely, which, yeah. Then in 2010 she told me she had a bad feeling about the wedding and begged me to postpone. I rolled my eyes and told her she was being dramatic. I actually said that to her. Dramatic. She was trying to save me every single time. And I blew her off. For 17 years she carried this secret alone, and I cannot stop thinking about what I said to her in those moments. I told a woman who was trying to protect me that she was being dramatic. That is going to stay with me forever. I drove home from that office at 11 p.m. My hands were shaking so bad I had to pull over twice on 75. Just sat there in the emergency lane with trucks flying past, reading that letter over and over under the dome light. Kevin was on the couch watching ESPN when I got home. Sports Center, I think. Tyler was asleep. I stood in the doorway of our living room, the living room of the house we bought together in 2016 for $312,000, the house where I thought we were building a life, and I said, Kevin, did your mother ever tell you that your father is Harold Calloway's son? His face told me everything before his mouth did. His jaw dropped. Then closed. Then he said, who told you that? Not what are you talking about? Not that is crazy. Who told you that? He knew. He admitted his mother told him in 2017. 7 years into our marriage. 3 years after Tyler was born. He said he did not tell me because Patricia said it did not matter, that it was a different generation, nobody needed to know. He said he Googled it and first cousins having kids only has a slightly elevated risk and Tyler was healthy, so what was the point of blowing everything up? He literally said he Googled it. Like that makes it okay. I stared at him and said, do you hear yourself right now? Your mother knew before our wedding. She threatened my grandmother. She let us get married knowing we were blood related. And you found out 7 years ago and just decided I did not deserve to know. He started crying and said, Jess, please, Tyler is healthy, we are happy, can we just, and he trailed off because he could see it in my face. There was no just anything anymore. I moved out 3 days later. I am staying in my grandmother's house in Buckhead now. The irony of living in the house of the woman who tried to warn me is not lost on me. I sleep in her guest room. The bed still has that old quilt she made in the 90s, the one with the blue and yellow squares. Her crossword puzzle book is still on the kitchen table, open to January 3rd. The day before she died. She got 14 across wrong, by the way. Wrote mast instead of missed. I cannot bring myself to close it. I filed for divorce February 12th through Carolyn Mead at Sterling & Associates in Atlanta. When I sat down in her office and laid it all out, she put down her coffee, leaned back in her chair, and said, I have been doing this for 22 years and I have never heard anything like this. Georgia does not actually have laws against first cousin marriage, it is technically legal here, but Carolyn said the fraud and concealment angle is rock solid. Kevin and Patricia knowingly concealed a material fact that would have affected my decision to marry. Carolyn called it constructive fraud and said she has seen judges award significant damages for this level of deliberate deception. But then things got even stranger. Because I was not prepared for what came next. I had Tyler tested. Not because I was worried, his pediatrician Dr. Rowan confirmed he is perfectly healthy, but because Carolyn recommended full genetic counseling for documentation. Tyler's results came back clean. No elevated markers for any recessive conditions. But the geneticist at Emory, Dr. Anisha Patel, asked me a question that stopped me cold. She said, has your husband ever done a DNA test? I said I do not think so. She said the reason I ask is that Tyler's paternal markers show some inconsistencies with the Hargrove lineage your grandmother's investigator documented. I said, what does that mean in plain English? She said it means there is a possibility that Kevin's biological father may not be Gerald Hargrove. Just let that sit for a second. There is now a chance that Kevin is not even Gerald's biological son. That Patricia's massive secret, the one she threatened a 76-year-old woman over, the one that destroyed my marriage and broke my family apart, might not even be real. Patricia might have blown up everything over something that is not even true. Gerald might not be Harold Calloway's son, or Kevin might not be Gerald's son, or both. The whole thing could be built on an affair from 55 years ago and a woman named Patricia who would rather let her son marry his cousin in silence than admit what she found in those letters. Kevin is now demanding his own DNA test. Patricia is refusing to speak to anyone and has blocked my number, Kevin's number, and her own sister's number. Just total radio silence. My father, who I told everything, has not spoken to me in 2 weeks. I think he is still processing the fact that his father had another family and never told anyone. My mother in Tucson sent me a text that just said wow followed by 3 dots. That is the most my mother has said to me in 6 months, so honestly pretty on brand for her. Tyler asked me last Tuesday why Daddy is not at the house anymore. I told him Mommy and Daddy need some time apart to figure some things out. He was quiet for a minute and then he said, is it because of the birthday phone call? He remembered. My 12-year-old son remembered the call that interrupted his birthday cake. He connected it. Kids notice everything. So here is where things stand right now. I inherited $2.3 million and a truth that cost me my marriage, my in-laws, and the entire version of my life I thought I was living. My grandmother spent 17 years trying to tell me the truth. She tried 3 times while she was alive and I would not listen. So she turned her own will into the one thing nobody could ignore. The DNA test was not a condition. It was a confession she could only make after she was gone. She knew I would not hear it from her. So she made sure I would hear it from science. Kevin has been texting me every single day. Sometimes angry, sometimes begging. Last night he sent one that said you are tearing apart everything we built over something that happened before either of us was born. And I typed out like 4 different responses and deleted every one because he still does not get it. It is not about the DNA. I do not care about the cousin thing, honestly, not really, people have dealt with worse. It is about the lie. It is about 17 years of silence. It is about a woman who looked me in the eye at my wedding, watched me walk down the aisle toward her son, and clapped. I still look at my phone every Sunday at 4:15. Every single week. Sometimes I even pick it up and hold it, waiting for a ring that is never coming. My grandmother was the only person in my entire family who loved me enough to tell me the truth. And the worst part, the part one cannot get past, is that I did not believe her when she was alive. She tried 3 times and I shut her down every time. I only listened when she made it impossible not to. So Reddit, tell me. Am I wrong for thinking Patricia Hargrove is the villain of this story? Kevin says I am destroying our family over something none of us can control. His mother says I am being dramatic. There is that word again. But a 76-year-old woman was bullied into silence for almost 2 decades, and the only thing she could control was her will, and she used it to finally tell the truth. Am I the crazy one for thinking that might be the most heartbreaking thing I have ever seen a person do for someone they love?